Isabel had been with Charles for 5 years without any status or title. He got tired of her and turned to propose to his ideal woman. Desperately, I begged him not to leave me. He sneered at me. Isabel, who are you pretending to be pitiful for? The ways you cling to me are getting more and more varied. Unfortunately, you don't have the right to negotiate with me. He didn't know that I wasn't pretending. I was really sick. He also didn't know that while he was betting with his friends on how long it would take for me to beg him again, my life was counting down. Later, I died on the day of his wedding. He went mad and didn't want his ideal woman anymore. Chapter 1. On the night of my birthday, I was about to blow out the candles alone when I suddenly received a call from Charles. I thought he had finally remembered my birthday, but what came through the receiver was, "Night Club, room 382. Get here within 10 minutes. Before I could respond, I heard the busy tone on the other end. I smiled bitterly, hung up the phone, and threw the cake into the trash. A few minutes later, I arrived at the club Charles had mentioned. At the door of the room, I happened to hear him talking about me with his friends. "Mr. Lee, Isabel has been with you the longest, hasn't she? Don't you ever consider settling down?" Charles raised an eyebrow flippantly. "Does she deserve it? In the end, she's just a commodity for sale." He paused and added, "Besides, I'm already tired of her." "Really? Then lend her to me for a few days." "Mr. Lee, honestly, Isabel is really quite a catch. Great body too. No wonder she's been with you for so many years." A brief shadow crossed Charles's face, but he quickly returned to his usual self. "Go ahead and play." Charles nonchalantly blew a smoke ring. "Just kidding, Mr. Lee. I wouldn't dare. Even if you lent her to me, I wouldn't dare touch your woman. Besides, even if you agreed, Isabel wouldn't. Everyone knows she loves you to death." Charles glanced at him. "What's there to be afraid of? If you want to play, play. If you don't believe me, we can bet on it. I'll let you have her, and within 3 days, she'll come crawling back to me. A woman like her, whether in bed or out, is just spineless." A burst of laughter erupted in the room. I took a deep breath, pretended not to hear anything, and pushed open the door to enter the room. Chapter 2. Charles and his friends played until very late, and I stayed with them just as long. In the early morning, I helped Charles, reeking of alcohol, back to his apartment. It took a lot of effort to get him onto the bed. Just as I was about to leave, Charles grabbed the back of my neck. He flipped over and pressed me under him. That night, perhaps because he had drunk too much strong liquor, his scorching body almost melted me. I was pinned down by him, thinking about the things he had said in the private room, feeling nothing but disgust. But in the heat of the moment, he would lean close to my ear and softly call me, "Issa." When I woke up in the morning, every bone in my body felt like it had fallen apart. Charles, however, was leisurely buttoning his shirt in front of the mirror. "From now on, you don't need to come here anymore," he said flatly. I lowered my eyes, my fingers clutching the edge of the blanket tightly, remembering what he had said in the private room last night. I wasn't surprised, but I still put aside my pride and begged him, "I'm sick. Can you please not abandon me?" As I spoke, a hot tear involuntarily rolled down my cheek. Charles, however, laughed coldly. "Isabel, who are you pretending to be pitiful for? The ways you cling to me are getting more and more varied. You acted all chaste and virtuous back then, but it was all for money, and I played you to pieces." My hand holding the blanket edge tightened unconsciously. "We can break up, but I want 500,000 as a breakup fee." 500,000 was exactly the amount I needed for a kidney transplant. "After all these years with you, you can't just use me for free." Charles, however, seemed provoked, as if talking about money hurt his feelings. He angrily pinned me down and grabbed my neck. "Isabel, it turns out all you ever loved was money. Unfortunately, you have no right to negotiate with me." After saying that, he slammed the door and left. Chapter 3. I sat alone in the room for a long time. The room still seemed to be filled with the smell of alcohol from Charles, mixed with the scent of his cologne, making my stomach churn. I covered my mouth and coughed violently a few times. finding it difficult to breathe. I thought I had gotten used to Charles's mood swings, but my heart still felt like it was being pierced with needles. After getting up, I noticed a gift box on the coffee table in the living room. It was a delicate white square box, tied with a silver ribbon, looking very expensive. I was stunned. I walked over, picked up the box, hesitated for a moment, and then opened it. Inside the box was a pearl white dress. The fabric of the dress was high-quality cotton satin, with an excellent texture, complementing the luxurious logo on the packaging bag. Pearl white was my favorite color. I didn't expect Charles to pay attention to such details. Almost involuntarily, I picked up the dress and walked to the mirror to try it on. In the mirror, my face was pale, with traces of tears at the corners of my eyes, looking haggard. But this dress fit me perfectly and looked surprisingly beautiful, as if it was tailor-made for me. I couldn't help but change into the dress and twirl in front of the mirror. The hem of the dress swayed gently with my movements, like a blooming white camellia. It turned out he hadn't forgotten my birthday. A hint of bitterness welled up in my heart, and my eyes couldn't help but turn red again. Chapter 4. Before going to bed, I scrolled through my phone and found that my social media feed was flooded with news of Charles's successful proposal. It turned out he had always had a cherished ideal woman. Her name was Elizabeth. During countless intimate nights, he had been calling out Elizabeth, not Isabel. I smiled bitterly, locked my phone screen, and closed my eyes to sleep. But I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. I remembered the days when I first met Charles. Back then, Charles took an immediate liking to me, but he had a notorious reputation for being a player, changing girlfriends frequently. I wanted to stay away from him and directly rejected him. Charles felt humiliated and flew into a rage. After all, no girl had ever rejected him so straightforwardly before. He publicly vowed to make my life miserable. Fate played a cruel trick on me, and soon after, I was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus. It affected multiple tissues and organs in my body. The monthly medical expenses alone amounted to tens of thousands. This cost was enough to bankrupt my already not well-off family. To survive, I had to swallow my pride and go back to Charles. Isabel, do you think my place is a garbage dump? Do you think I'm a man you can reject and then come back to whenever you want? If you want to be with me, show some sincerity. That night, he came down on me, domineering and ruthless. Isabel, didn't you think you were so noble? Yet here you are, begging under me for money. He knew it was my first time, yet he deliberately intensified his force. It felt like I was being torn apart, my whole body trembling, but I still gritted my teeth, refusing to let the tears fall. Chapter 5. That night, while I was in a hazy sleep, I vaguely felt someone wiping the tears from the corners of my eyes, kissing the corners of my eyes. In my daze, I smelled a hint of cologne, mixed with a faint scent of tobacco. When I woke up in the morning, I found myself tightly held in Charles's arms. He was very warm, making me almost reluctant to leave this moment of peace. For a while after that, Charles didn't treat me as harshly as he had said he would. We even acted like a couple. He particularly liked holding me, burying his head in my hair. Despite his usual sleep problems, he always fell asleep quickly beside me. I had a sweet tooth, and I often found treats like cakes, chocolates, and milk tea at home. On holidays, Charles would casually transfer me 52,000 yuan with a note saying voluntary gift, until his friends started reminding him not to get too attached, reminding him that I was only with him for the money. They didn't even try to hide it from me. I still remember that night when he heard his friends' kind reminders again. Charles smashed his wine glass to pieces. Everyone shut the fuck up. That night, as if venting, he took me wildly like the first time, without considering my feelings. In the midst of our passionate entanglement, he would call my name gently, so tenderly that I felt a moment of confusion. However, soon after, he would shout coldly, "Don't ever think I'll fall in love with a gold digger like you." After that, he almost never stayed the night with me again. He would leave right after. The only thing that remained unchanged was that Charles still transferred my living expenses every month, always more rather than less. He only knew that the money he gave me was almost spent every month. As for where the money went, he didn't know and didn't care. He just assumed I was a gold digger who sold my body for money. On countless nights after that, he was just as ruthless and reckless, never caring about my feelings. But sometimes, he would call my name gently, so tenderly that I felt a moment of confusion and my heart would skip a beat. However, soon after, he would shout coldly, "Don't ever think I'll fall in love with a gold digger like you." The only comfort was that Charles still transferred my living expenses every month, always more rather than less. He only knew that the money he gave me was almost spent every month. As for where the money went, he didn't know and didn't care. He just assumed I was a gold digger who sold my body for money. Chapter 6. A few days later, paparazzi caught photos of Charles and Elizabeth vacationing in Hawaii. The pictures quickly became a trending topic. Charles generously admitted and officially announced, "Let me introduce you to my fiancée, Elizabeth." I looked at their sweet photos in the announcement, feeling a bit lost. I grew up in a small mountain village inland and had never seen the sea. One of my few wishes in life was to see the ocean once, but I never had the chance to make it happen. A few months ago, perhaps because I had been behaving so obediently, Charles asked me what I wanted for my birthday and offered to take me out to relax. He asked where I wanted to go. I said, "I want to go to Hawaii to see the ocean." "Okay." Charles agreed readily. It wasn't a difficult thing for him at all, but he forgot. Not only my birthday but also the promise between us. I shouldn't have had any expectations. Looking at their announcement photos, I knew I would always be the woman he kept in the shadows. No matter the reason we started. After 5 years of intimate moments, it's a lie to say I wasn't hurt. I wondered, while he was vacationing in Hawaii with Elizabeth, did he ever think about our promise? Even for a moment? Chapter 7. With my benefactor gone, life still had to go on. To survive, I wouldn't give up. I always believed that as long as you live, there is hope. During the transition period, I found a part-time job at a charity gala, earning 200 yuan per hour. Although it was a high society social event, I wasn't afraid of running into Charles. Because Charles despised such events, saying they were full of hypocritical pretense. Those capitalists didn't show any mercy when exploiting ordinary people. However, at the gala, I not only saw Charles but also Elizabeth. It turned out that even someone as rebellious as Charles would do something he didn't like for the woman he loved. Elizabeth noticed me too. "Are you Isabel?" She deliberately raised her voice. "So? Got dumped and now haunting this place? A woman like you would do anything for money. I heard people say you look like me." "That's an insult to me. Look at you, looking all haggard, like you're about to die." Then she noticed the CL tattoo on my finger. It was during a rough patch between me and Charles that he forced me to get it, like marking a pet. Elizabeth sneered. "A lowly woman like you sure has many tricks to please a man. Afraid people won't know who your master is, right?" Instinctively, I covered the tattoo with my other hand. Elizabeth suddenly grabbed my wrist. "What, now you're ashamed? That's none of your business, Miss Elizabeth. Please have some self-respect." I forcefully shook off her hand. Elizabeth slipped and fell backward with a scream, shattering her wine glass and cutting her hand deeply. Blood stained her custom white dress and the floor. Charles, who was talking to a foreign businessman, turned his gaze over and immediately turned cold. Then everyone saw him almost rush over and scoop Elizabeth into his arms. He shot me a cold glance. "Who the hell gave you the nerve?" "Isabel, there's a time and place for jealousy." Chapter 8. Before I could open my mouth to retort, a burning slap landed on my face. Charles hit me so hard that I was instantly dizzy, seeing stars. My whole body lost balance, but a pair of strong hands caught me. "Mr. Lee, hitting a woman in public is quite ungentlemanly." I turned my head to see a stranger's face, gentle and refined, with an air of elegance. "Dr. White, this doesn't seem to concern you, does it?" "She's my friend." Hearing this, I was a bit confused. As far as I could remember, I didn't know anyone named Dr. White. Charles glanced at me, then at Dr. White, who was holding my hand tightly, and his face darkened even more. "Isabel, quite the skill you have. A few days without seeing you, and you've already hooked up with the hottest doctor in B City, William White." I was about to argue back, but Charles turned and left. He turned to Elizabeth in his arms and spoke softly. "Let's go home." He carried her in his arms and walked towards the exit of the banquet hall. After Charles and Elizabeth left, Dr. White held my shoulders tightly. His grip was strong enough to cause slight pain. "Are you okay?" "Thank you, Dr. White, I'm fine. But it seems you just offended Charles because of me. He's a very unpredictable person, and he holds grudges. Offending him won't end well." I bit my lip in guilt. "What are you afraid of?" "I'm the only one in Asia who can perform his grandfather's surgery. The old man's condition doesn't allow him to seek medical treatment overseas." "That's a relief." Dr. White seemed to notice the rashes on my arms and neck due to stopping medication. His eyes darkened immediately. "Isabel, you're sick and need to be hospitalized immediately." Instinctively, I pulled my sleeves to cover the unsightly rashes. "Dr. White, I'm fine. Thank you for your concern." Dr. White seemed to see through my worries. "You don't need to worry about the medical expenses." I was stunned. "Dr. White, do you know me?" Chapter 9. Dr. White gave a bitter smile. "Isabel, do you really not remember me?" I looked at him, a bit bewildered. Dr. White seemed to find a way to ease the situation. "Miss Jiang, from now on, you will be my patient. You have plenty of time to remember me." And so, I became Dr. White's patient and was admitted to the hospital under his arrangement. Dr. White was usually very busy, but whenever he had time, he would personally come to check on me. When he wasn't around, I stayed alone in the hospital room. Today, as I was getting in for drip, Charles suddenly appeared. "Isabel, you've really outdone yourself, putting on a full act." I ignored his sarcastic tone. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing?" "You injured Isa out of jealousy and embarrassed her in public. Do you think I would just let that go?" As expected, Charles never let go of a grudge. "It seems like she embarrassed herself." "Shut the hell up. Even if you hide in the hospital pretending to be pitiful, you still owe Isa. What do you want?" I asked coldly. "Issa said she feels uncomfortable seeing the tattoo on your hand." "Don't worry, I'll get it removed when I'm discharged." "No need for that trouble. I can help you." "What do you mean?" A sense of fear rose within me. I knew Charles was crazy, but I never thought he'd go so far as to pick up the fruit knife from my bedside table. He slowly advanced toward my hand. I was genuinely terrified and screamed, "Charles, don't touch me. What part of you hasn't been touched by me? Now that I'm not giving you money, you don't want to be touched anymore?" I tried desperately to evade, but Charles grabbed my neck, pinning me down on the bed, making it impossible to move. The knife tip pierced my flesh, and the blade slowly cut along the outline of the tattoo, blood oozing out. The searing pain almost suffocated me, but it was nothing compared to the anguish in my heart. I whimpered, my body trembling uncontrollably. Hatred flared up in my chest like wildfire. I wanted to fight back, to scream, but the disparity in strength between a man and a woman made my struggle as futile as waves crashing against rocks. "This will teach you not to mess with me and Isa again," he sneered. When he finished the final cut, I nearly fainted. The tattoo was now blurred, replaced by patches of blood. A minor flesh wound, it will heal in a few days. "Look at you, being so dramatic." As he set down the fruit knife, his gaze landed on the medical report on the bedside table. Charles paused, visibly stunned. He stared at the report, his fingers curling slightly as if he couldn't believe what it said. "Systemic lupus erythematosus," he muttered, frowning as if hearing the condition for the first time. I turned my face away, not wanting to see his fake concern. "What is this?" He finally looked up, a trace of unease in his voice. "None of your business," I replied coldly, though my heart ached with bitterness. "Isabel," he suddenly raised his voice, slamming the bedside table with a loud bang. I flinched, my shoulders trembling, but I refused to back down. "Don't let me find out you're playing tricks again," he growled, eyes menacing. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and suppressed the emotions surging within me. Charles stood silent for a moment, seemingly struggling with something. In the end, he said nothing, turned, and stormed out, leaving me alone in the hospital room. I watched the sky outside gradually darken, tears silently streaming down my cheeks. "Charles, you'll never understand, I never played any tricks." Chapter 10. On the drive back, Charles felt as if there was a stone in his heart. He kept repeating the words systemic lupus erythematosus in his mind, feeling inexplicably irritated. He tried not to think about it. But the more he tried, the more those details he had previously ignored came vividly to mind. For example, Isabel always seemed very tired, her face pale, frequently complaining about being exhausted. For example, she always wore long sleeves and pants even in the sweltering summer. For example, her wrists were always covered with band-aids, saying they were from cat scratches. He had believed her at the time. Now, thinking back, those so-called cat scratches. Charles shook his head vigorously, trying to rid his mind of these disturbing thoughts. It couldn't be possible. Isabel had always been in good health. Besides, he had been with Isabel for 5 years. If she had a serious illness, he would have known, right? Whatever, in his mind, only diseases like cancer could be fatal. This so-called systemic lupus erythematosus, he had no idea what it was. He kept finding reasons to convince himself, but the unease in his heart, like vines, tightened more and more, almost suffocating him. He irritably turned on the car music, hoping the deafening sound would dispel the gloom in his heart. But the familiar melodies now sounded off, pounding his eardrums and his heart. Charles slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the side of the road. He leaned weakly against the seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He didn't know what was wrong with him. He should be happy. The troublesome Isabel was finally going to disappear from his life, and he could finally be with his Elizabeth. But why couldn't he feel happy? Why was his mind full of Isabel's pale face? Charles closed his eyes in pain. He didn't know that some answers, once missed, could never be found again. Chapter 11. When Dr. White came in, I was half asleep. The sunlight filtering through the window danced on my eyelids, but I couldn't feel its warmth. I was a light sleeper, and any slight noise could wake me up. So even with Dr. White's deliberately light footsteps, I still woke up. He walked to my bedside and put down what he was holding. I saw his eyebrows furrow slightly, his gaze falling on my bandaged finger. His face immediately darkened. I was startled, instinctively trying to pull my hand under the blanket, but he quickly grasped my wrist. "Don't move," he said firmly, though his tone was still gentle. "How can you be so careless in this state?" His sudden action left me a bit bewildered, so I obediently let him examine the wound. Being as perceptive as he was, he must have guessed what had happened. But he didn't say anything. His movements were gentle, treating me like a fragile treasure, meticulously cleaning, medicating, and bandaging the wound. For a doctor of his caliber to personally dress my wound. I watched his lowered brows and eyes, his thick eyelashes casting a shadow under his eyelids, and his focused expression oddly gave me a sense of long-lost peace. After bandaging, Dr. White softly said, "Go back to sleep." When he spoke, his eyes seemed to sparkle with starlight. Then, out of nowhere, he produced a small teddy bear and placed it by my bedside. The bear was fluffy and emitted a faint lavender scent, similar to Dr. White's own scent. Dr. White addressed the bear, "I'm assigning you to duty today. Keep an eye on the patient for me, okay?" His tone was serious, as if he were giving an important task. I was amused by his demeanor. When I was with Charles, I never smiled so easily. Then he gently patted my head, the gesture feeling natural. "Rest well," he said, before turning and leaving the room. He quietly closed the door behind him. Chapter 12. Hugging the little bear. I slept soundly for once. In my dream, I seemed to return to my childhood. Back then, I wasn't sick, nor had I met Charles. It was a sunny afternoon, and the golden sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, casting a warm glow on my desk. The illustrations in my textbook were bathed in a warm aura. I was resting my chin in my hand, listening to the teacher's lecture absent-mindedly, my thoughts already wandering far away. "Isabel, answer this question." The teacher suddenly called my name, jolting me back to reality. I looked blankly at the blackboard. "Isabel, what's wrong with you? Not paying attention in class again?" The teacher's stern voice made my cheeks flush with embarrassment. I stammered as I stood up, unable to answer the question, only able to lower my head in awkward silence. Just then, my deskmate Bob stood up, his face red, stammering, "Teacher, I know the answer." He quickly gave the correct answer and glanced at me secretly. "Good thing you have a bit of a conscience," I muttered under my breath. In this class, I was Bob's only friend. He was often teased because he was overweight. "Fat pig. Even my family's pig doesn't eat as much as you. Look at you. Your belly is bigger than my waist." Whenever this happened, Bob would always lower his head, biting his lip without saying a word. And I just couldn't stand it. I would pick up my textbook and throw it at those people's heads. Shut up. How much he eats has nothing to do with you. Whether he's fat or thin. In my eyes, he's 100 times better than you bullies. After they left, I patted Bob on the shoulder. Ignore them. Just be yourself. No matter what others say about you, you still have me as your desk mate. Bob looked up at me, his eyes showing surprise. But even more, they shone like stars. Chapter 13. Before my dream could finish, I was woken by a slight noise. Groggily, I opened my eyes to see a nurse carrying a tray walking in. Miss Jiang, you're awake, the nurse said gently. How do you feel? Is there any discomfort? I rubbed my eyes and realized the room was filled with sunlight. What time is it? I asked in a hoarse voice. It's already noon. You've been sleeping for a long time, the nurse said as she placed the tray on the bedside table. Dr. White prepared this specially for you. Eat it while it's hot. I then noticed I was still holding the little teddy bear. Please help me thank Dr. White, I said, feeling a bit embarrassed. The nurse smiled and left the room. I set the bear aside and picked up my phone, habitually opening my social media app. The next second, I froze. The top trending topic, #Charles hashtag. I clicked in and saw that Dr. White had exposed Charles's recent violence against me in the hospital. Dr. White had even directly tagged Charles. As a doctor, I have a responsibility to protect my patients. If Mr. Lee continues to harm my patients, I have the right to refuse treatment for the Lee family. This post caused an immediate uproar. Oh my God, is this the behavior of a supposedly well-educated heir? Ha, just another spoiled, useless rich kid. Assaulting someone in broad daylight, in a hospital no less. Does he think being rich and powerful allows him to do whatever he wants? However, some comments were directed at me. She deserves it. Selling herself for money and then pretending to be a victim? Yeah, one willing to hit, the other willing to take it. Still clinging after the breakup, ruining his relationship with his fiancée. Serves her right. I think she's just trying to stir up trouble for sympathy. Poor Dr. White. Such a kind and pure person, being used by someone like her. Reading these comments, my heart felt like it was being pricked by countless needles, aching intensely. But when I refreshed the page, all the negative comments about me were gone. Chapter 14. From that point on, Charles seemed to keep a low profile, probably reprimanded by the Lee family, and didn't cause any more trouble. But in the end, none of it mattered to me anymore, because my health was deteriorating, and I still hadn't found a matching kidney. One day, I fell into a hazy dream again, filled with random, unrelated scenes. I saw myself as a child, clumsily learning to ride a bicycle. Next to me stood a chubby little boy, laughing heartily, pointing at me and saying, "Isabel, you look like a little bear on that bike." I glared at him angrily and said, "Mind your own business. Go away." The boy laughed even more, showing his cute little canine teeth. That's when I realized his smiling eyes looked exactly like Dr. White's, especially the tear mole at the corner of his eye, identical to Dr. White's. Then, I vaguely heard Dr. White's anxious voice in my ear. "Isabel, don't sleep. You can't sleep." The voice grew fainter, as if it was coming from behind thick frosted glass, audible but unreachable. I tried hard to open my mouth, to tell him I could hear him, to tell him I remembered, but my throat felt blocked, unable to make any sound. The world before me grew blurrier, and a tear silently slid down my cheek. The teddy bear I was holding fell to the ground. The room grew silent. Chapter 15. After my body turned completely cold, I realized I still had consciousness. I felt light, like a feather. It turned out I had become a soul. I looked down at my body, lying on the hospital bed, not peacefully, as if I were just asleep. I saw Dr. White, his eyes red and filled with agonizing pain. He held my hand tightly, calling my name over and over again. "Isabel, Isabel, please, don't sleep." His voice was hoarse, thick with a nasal tone, and it tore at my heart. I tried to reach out to comfort him, but my hand passed right through his body. Only then did I realize I was dead and could no longer hold on to anything. Dr. White. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I could only watch him helplessly, seeing him cry like a lost child. I noticed a tear mole at the corner of his eye, glistening in the light. That tear mole overlapped with my dream, with that chubby little boy. So, it was really you. Then, I felt myself starting to drift, lightly, like willow catkins in the wind, without direction or purpose, until I saw Charles. In a dreamy manner, he was wearing a sharp black suit. The word groom hanging on his chest was particularly striking. It turned out that the day I died was his wedding day. But Charles didn't look very happy. He even seemed a bit uneasy. Finally, after his eyelid twitched a few times, he seemed to remember something suddenly. He pulled out his phone from his pocket. I saw his trembling hands typing in the search bar. Can systemic lupus erythematosus be fatal? When he got the affirmative answer, Charles visibly wavered, and his phone fell to the ground with a clack. Charles, what's wrong? The ceremony is about to start. Why are you still standing here? Elizabeth, in her luxurious wedding dress, walked up to him and took his arm, with a trace of barely perceptible displeasure in her voice. Charles forced a smile, gently patted Elizabeth's hand, and said softly, "It's nothing. I'm just a bit nervous." Nervous? Is he really nervous? I couldn't help but find it amusing. Chapter 16. The grand wedding ceremony began, and the wedding march echoed throughout the hall, but Charles seemed somewhat absent-minded. He mechanically went through each step, his eyes vacant. Mr. Charles, do you take this beautiful lady beside you as your wife, to be united with her, to love her, comfort her, respect her, and protect her, as you love yourself? Will you remain faithful to her in sickness and in health, in wealth or poverty, as long as you both shall live? The officiant's booming voice reverberated in the hall. Charles, however, seemed not to hear a word, showing no reaction. Elizabeth's smile gradually stiffened. She pinched Charles's arm hard, whispering, "Charles, you need to say I do." Charles snapped back to reality and looked blankly at Elizabeth. Charles, what's wrong? Quickly say I do, Elizabeth urged, her tone anxious. The guests began to murmur among themselves, curiously watching the couple. Charles took a deep breath. As if making a significant decision, he abruptly pushed Elizabeth away and said resolutely, "I'm sorry. I have something to do." What? Elizabeth's eyes widened in disbelief. The guests erupted into a buzz of conversation, discussing the sudden turn of events. What's going on? Why is the groom suddenly backing out? Could it be a runaway groom? I've never seen anything like this. Charles ignored the murmurs and walked straight out of the hall without looking back. Elizabeth, in a fit of rage, forgot all about maintaining her composure and shouted at Charles's retreating figure. "Charles, you bastard! What do you take me for?" She frantically tore at her wedding dress, her meticulously applied makeup unable to hide her now somewhat ferocious expression, making her look like a shrew. The guests' murmurs grew louder. The groom's outrageous behavior at the wedding was already disgraceful enough. They never expected that this future daughter-in-law of a wealthy family couldn't even maintain basic dignity, resorting to public insults. It was truly a shocking spectacle. Chapter 17. Charles drove like a maniac, running red lights all the way to the hospital. He stumbled into my hospital room, where Dr. White still was, his eyes bloodshot, standing vigil by my bed. "Issa," Charles's voice trembled, as if he were terrified of something. The next second, Charles's face turned deathly pale. It was as if all the strength had been drained from his body. He staggered and nearly lost his balance. "Impossible, impossible," he muttered, his eyes vacant, like he had lost his soul. Dr. White saw him and punched him square in the face. "Charles, how dare you show your face here?" Dr. White roared, his eyes blazing with fury. "Aren't you rich? Why didn't you get her treatment sooner? Why did you wait until she was beyond saving? What have you been doing to her all these years?" Hearing this, Charles's pupils trembled. He turned his head from the punch, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, but he seemed to feel no pain. Standing there dazed, Dr. White's gaze fell on the groom boutonniere pinned to Charles's chest, his eyes growing even angrier. Who are you pretending to be all affectionate for now? Who are you trying to fool? Dr. White grabbed his collar, questioning him word by word. Charles slowly raised his head, his face frighteningly pale. Impossible, impossible, he kept repeating, as if possessed. Isa was always healthy. She couldn't. Suddenly snapping out of it, he stood up abruptly, stumbling towards me. Issa, don't be afraid. I'll take you away. He tried to lift my body, but Dr. White stopped him. Get out! You have no right to touch her, Dr. White shouted, swinging another punch. Charles didn't dodge, taking the blow directly, the blood at the corner of his mouth becoming more pronounced. His bloodshot eyes stared at Dr. White. Let me take her. I have to take Issa. He repeated this over and over, as if clinging to the last shred of hope. I need to take Issa to see the ocean. I'll agree to any condition. Just let me take her. Charles's voice was hoarse, and the usually arrogant man now had a pleading tone. Dr. White looked at him coldly, full of contempt. Do you think money makes you powerful? Can it buy back her life? Dr. White shouted. Charles's body trembled violently again. He collapsed to the floor, supporting himself with his hands, but unable to stand. Please, he begged softly. Dr. White didn't spare him another glance. Calling the security guards outside, take him away. 2 guards came in, lifting Charles and dragging him out of the room. Charles continued to struggle, screaming, Issa! Issa! His voice grew fainter until it finally disappeared down the hallway. In the hospital room, only Dr. White and my cold body remained. Dr. White collapsed into a chair, exhausted, and closed his eyes in fatigue. Chapter 18. Dr. White was disciplined for assaulting Charles in the hospital. He resigned outright. His exact words were, if I can't save the woman I love, there's no point in being a doctor. I knew he was blaming himself, feeling guilty for not being able to save me. On the day of my funeral, Dr. White came to see me off, dressed in black, looking haggard. He gently placed the brown teddy bear that had accompanied me during my final days in front of my tombstone. His eyes red but not shedding a tear. Rest well, Issa. His voice was hoarse but still gentle. I thought I would rest in peace. But every day, I felt a scorching gaze on my tombstone. It was Charles. He came every day, rain or shine. He always wore a black shirt, holding a bouquet of my favorite white gardenias. Kneeling before my tombstone, his eyes bloodshot and filled with haunting red veins. Issa, the truth is, the person I've always loved is you. He choked out, his voice trembling. Ever since you hit me with a book when we were kids, I thought you were special. I really, really liked you. But why didn't you like me back? Do you know how happy I was when you agreed to be with me? But when I thought you were only with me for the money, I couldn't stay happy. He laughed self-deprecatingly, a tear slipping down his cheek. I wanted to be good to you. But my pride, that's why I treated you the way I did. He started clutching his head in pain. You don't know, that day at the bar, when someone said I should lend you to him for 2 days, I wanted to kill him. But my pride. Issa, I'm such a joke, right? Issa, it's all my fault. I couldn't protect you. Issa, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please come back, okay? He pressed his face against my tombstone, his voice hoarse and filled with desperate pleading. I never took you to see the ocean. Watching him like this, all I felt was disgust. Chapter 19. I died, but I witnessed my own wedding. I never would have imagined that Charles would use my belongings to hold a wedding ceremony. On that day, Charles wore a black suit, holding a bouquet of white gardenias, with a nearly pathological, obsessive smile on his face, and the bride beside him was adorned in my favorite pearl white dress. 2 weddings in a short span of time. The second one held with the belongings of a dead person. Charles had become the laughingstock of Albee City, known as a madman. I heard people talking about Charles. Charles must be insane, right? He called off a wedding because his ex-girlfriend died, and now he marries a tablet? I heard the bride wore the wedding dress that his ex-girlfriend loved most when she was alive. That's so creepy. I have a friend who was at the wedding. They said Charles was laughing and crying at the tablet, just like a lunatic. What about Elizabeth? What did he do to Elizabeth? Elizabeth. She kept pestering Charles. And in his impatience, he beat her so badly she was severely injured. She's in the hospital, fighting for her life. Chapter 20. That day, the rain was particularly heavy. The rain fell like broken pearls, hitting the tombstone and Charles's bloodless face. Charles knelt in front of my grave, his whole body soaked by the rain. He clutched a fruit knife tightly in his hand. The tip pointed at his own heart. "Issa, I'm here to join you," he said, his voice thick with despair. I watched him, feeling nothing but calm. I wanted to ask him, "Have you ever thought that I don't want you to join me?" With a flash of the knife, Charles plunged it into himself. Bright red blood instantly stained his white shirt. A shocking sight. Just then, a figure rushed over, forcefully pushing Charles away. It was Dr. White. He grabbed the knife from Charles's hand and threw it aside. "If you want to go crazy, do it somewhere else, but not at Issa's grave," Dr. White shouted. "You didn't treat her well when she was alive, and now you're coming here to act insane. How low can you go?" Charles collapsed to the ground, his eyes vacant, as if all hope was lost. "Charles, you don't deserve to follow Issa. You'd only taint her path to reincarnation," Dr. White said, each word deliberate and firm. Hearing this, Charles's body trembled violently, and he clutched his head, emitting painful sobs. He had completely broken down. Later, Charles was sent to a mental institution. Every day, he held the white dress I loved so much, talking to the air about our past memories. But who would pay any attention to him?